Okay, today we're going to make a nut for this guitar. I like to use cow bone. This is the leg bone of a cow. It's already been processed, bleached out, so that it doesn't have any grease on it. And this is just the raw stock. They come about a 1/4 inch thick, about a 1/2 inch high, I believe. And yep, 1/2 inch by 1/4, probably by 2 1/2. 2 inches. And what we need to do is just kind of start from the bottom up, and we'll be machining every single surface of it in very precise ways. Really the first thing to do is to get the fit of the nut against the neck and the bottom and the back end of the fretboard established. Right. We'll want to do those first. And this particular guitar, it's a little bit sloped, it's a little bit off angle, and I went ahead and pre-cut this one. You can see it's not as exactly at a 90-degree angle. In fact, it's probably more like about 80 or 85 degrees off the plane of the face.
So that's to kind of match up with how the neck lays back,
right?
The headstock, and
right, because it's not machined perfectly square, so
it's lying flat against the back of this fretboard.
Yeah, see how it's touching pretty much all along the base there, and then also at the back of the neck. Kind of hard to see without the light there, but
right.
And we'll be cutting this back a little bit on this side because you can see it's overhanging over the finish a little bit. That's not a big deal. Quite often there's usually like a peg head veneer that comes up back here that establishes the thickness of it, and you'll have to fit the nut between the fretboard and the peg head into a groove like that. And that's a little bit more time consuming because it takes a while to get that fit just right. And there's Fender guitars, which also they have a slot that you have to fit the nut into.
Okay.
We don't have to worry about that. So what I'll have you do, this will be yours, and so we're going to machine that bottom end first, and I'll show you the setup over here to do that. I don't remember the exact angle there, but that looks like it's pretty close. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to let you do this.
Okay.
And we'll just turn this on. And this is just kind of to keep things flat, and just kind of set that up against there, and then use your fingers and just kind of sand it. And what you want to make sure you kind of keep it pressed against there flat, and then just back it off once you look like you've sanded everything flat on it.
Okay.
So don't go any further than you really need to, but you can see right there how, see you got a little bit of a gap there. Just sand up until that gap goes away.
Just enough to take that angle off, huh?
Well, yeah, hold on a second. One thing, too, that I need to mention is that when you're holding it against the sanding drum, don't hold it there any longer than you have to, because it will actually burn the nut.
You can smell it.
You can smell it. Now, a really good way to determine if you're making good contact all along there is hit it one more time and see if that line completely disappears.
So what we did was we put a little pencil line here on the nut, just to make sure when we go back and do this final sanding that we're kind of getting good contact all up and down it, and we've done a nice clean sand. So it's just an easy little trick. Put the pencil marking on the side that you're going to sand, and that way you can see where exactly you've sanded on it.
I think he needs to go upside down.
Yep.
Just kind of double check. It's nice to get a straight edge on there. And you can see we got a little bit of a bow to it, actually. See that?
Yeah.
So we got a little bit of a, and that happens not unusually on the on that disc sander, because it's not super accurate. Now let's try to do the same thing. Make a little line on there.
What is this, like a tile?
Uh-huh.
A super flat tile with some 100 grit sandpaper on it.
And see, I've
Yeah.
gotten rid of the pencil line there.
So the angle's already kind of covered by
Yeah,
just
I was
putting it
careful
on
not
the...
to rock it. In fact, you can kind of see how it still sits on there at a little bit of an angle.
Right.
And it's pretty easy to hold it at that angle. And when you're sanding, it makes it hard. It's actually hard to tip it. So if you hold it there flat, and then let's see how we did on the flatness of it. See the difference?
Oh, yeah.
There's no light. So that's what we want, because we can assume that the guitar is flat too, although that's maybe not always a safe assumption, but you know, it's definitely easier to start off with flat surfaces. So let's see how it's fitting on there. Looks pretty good. And you can kind of feel it when it's flat. It doesn't rock that way or that way. So we got good contact. So I think that's good to go on those two sides.
Okay.
So it doesn't really hurt to
Mark.
make some marks so that we keep coming back in the same place and not end up turning something around. So that's the bottom, and this is the fretboard.
Okay.
Next, we need to address the ends. And what I like to do is a good sharp pencil. I'll let you do yours, and I'll show you how I'm going to do this one. So we want to just kind of hold it in place. And you might need to move it back and forth a little bit to find one spot that seems to fit a little bit better than the others. But theoretically, it probably shouldn't make much difference. And now we're just going to mark the end. So I'm going to hold it in place, take this sharp pencil, mark it right there, and then on the bottom, using the neck as my guide. Okay. So you can see I've got the marks on the bottom and on the side there. And one thing to notice is that there's a little bit of a taper on the neck, which is not unusual. In fact, it's more common than not. And we want to kind of match that. We want to have the nut be really nicely flush to the sides. So if this tapers a little bit as it goes out, we want to match that taper.
Okay.
So if we got a little bit to remove, sanding is fine, but here we got quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And I'm going to cut it and leave about 1/8 of an inch there for dressing down later. Not a good cut, but we'll take care of that.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not trying to have it smooth at this point, correct?
Right. Just taking away some of the stock.
So is this a special blade at all?
It's a razor blade. It's a very, very fine blade, so it cuts really smooth. You can see that the teeth on it are so small they're almost invisible. Now we're going to work on the ends, getting those fit, and we'll just start with coarse sanding and take that down to finer hand sanding. To start with, I'm turning mine upside down, and I'm just going to kind of match that angle a little bit.
So you don't want to burn it.
Yeah, I've burned it before.
What does that do when you burn it? Does it just discolor it?
It'll turn brown. But you can see it getting a little bit dark in there. So we gotta avoid that.
That's got to keep it cool by transferring heat to the metal.
Right.
So then did you need to catch the different angle on it?
This one was pretty square. This one had a little bit of a taper to it, so I was keeping that one pretty square. But this one I'm angling just a little bit to get that taper. So at this point, I just went ahead and cut them down pretty much to the line. And then we'll remove a little bit more by hand sanding some paper. And we just kind of want to get the visible scratches from that 100 grit sanding disc out of there. So the trick is to try to hold it flat against there, not letting it tip or rock or whatever. It doesn't take much to get rid of those. That the trick right there. And you can see that one's a little bit off. That's the one that's off of 90 degrees a little bit.
Right.
I'm applying quite a bit of pressure to keep it flat, keep it from rocking one way or the other.
Okay.
Okay. So we kind of want to do that until we get it where it basically feels flush against here. I still have a ways to go.
So you got extra on your sides?
Yep. I'm making the other side flush right now, and you can see there's about a 30-second sticking out there. So I've got quite a bit of material to remove on both ends. So that's the process we use. We just keep doing it until
kind of hitting every face there and make sure it's smooth.
hitting those edges.
And you weren't tilting it that way.
I was doing this.
Okay.
I was
so kind of
radiusing
rounding
it.
them.
I was radiusing the entire edge. Still a little bit more, but it's getting real close.
So after doing the 400, we moved to an 800. That's kind of the finishing paper. Again, used against a really flat surface to make sure we're keeping everything nice and flat. And as you can see, he's kind of radiusing the sides by tilting it, kind of rounding the edges a little bit.
So you can see it's flush on that end and on this end. I'm not getting any catching there at all. It just blends right into it. So it's a lot of work for kind of the first step here, but it's a real important step because you really want this to feel smooth in this area. Okay, so the next step is to work on the top.
Okay.
And I made up this little pencil which you set right here on top of the frets, and then just
So that's to kind of get the radius of the fretboard on there, huh?
right. Now this radius, actually we're going to go sand it, and we're going to probably want to stay on the bass side. This is the bass strings. We probably want to stay up a little bit higher, and then as we come over here to the treble side, go ahead and get down close to that line there.
Okay. So how much of a distance does this little pencil tool leave?
I don't know. It's I mean, you can kind of look at it here. If we scribed right there on the fretboard, you can see there's quite a bit of difference there. So what we're having to make up for with here is the height of the fret, which is about 50 thousandths, plus a little bit more, because we need a little bit of nut standing up above the fret plane in order to hold the string properly. So that's why there's that much of a gap.
Okay. And why do you leave more on the bass side than on the treble side?
You'll see as we get into it, but we actually want to have, well, the action, when we set the height of the notches, the treble strings will be closer to the fret than the bass strings. You need the bass strings up a little bit higher to keep them from buzzing.
That's just because of the thickness of the string?
Yeah, and the flexibility. The wound strings are more flexible than the solid metal strings.
Okay.
On a prorated basis. And so we just need more fret or nut material, hold it up a little bit higher, and then also to kind of stand up and hold the larger dimension of the strings themselves.
Okay.
What some people do, instead of using a setup like that, is just to use what's called a half pencil. That's a pencil that I've taken and I've ground off half of it. And what that does is it allows the height of the lid to be almost at the same height as this surface right here. So go ahead and
So you'd put it like this?
yeah, put it like that on top of the frets, and then just scribe across there. Why don't you go ahead and do the same thing with this tool. I think it's going to be just a little bit higher. Let's see the difference that it makes. There you go. Yeah. We need to talk about the angle that the peg head creates and what effect that has. And I don't normally measure it, but it doesn't hurt to kind of get an idea of how much we're talking about here. So if we set that up, that's pretty close. This particular peg head has an angle of about 15%. 15 degrees, I'm sorry. 15 degrees.
Okay.
And the strings are going to come along here pretty much parallel to the fretboard. Then they're going to go pretty much parallel to the peg head. And so the slots here on the nut, and actually the top face of the nut itself, we don't want it to be flat. We don't want it to actually be all the ways back at the peg head. We're going to kind of split the difference. And so half of 15 degrees is 7.5 degrees. So that's actually where I'm going to set my sander to establish an initial level top of the nut. At about 7.5 degrees. And kind of remember, as I stated, we want to stay a little bit high on the bass side, and as we get over here on the treble side, we want to get pretty close to that line. So it's just really kind of the same thing, except now we're sanding at this bevel angle. We don't want to sand it flat. We want to go ahead and sand it in a curve, following that line. And once again, kind of don't hold it against the sanding disc for very long. Kind of keep moving it around so it doesn't get hot. About like that. And once again, I almost got too hot on it. It got started to get just a little bit brown, but not too bad. But you can see I stayed a little bit high on the bass. Over here on the treble, I'm getting down pretty close to it, and kept it at a fair curve.